One way or another, you are conditioning your audience. Now, I recently did a Facebook Live where we talked about conditioning your audience to click, conditioning them to expect offers, conditioning them to buy. But what about the way you deliver your content? How are you conditioning your audience, and are you delivering on their expectations? So, continuing in this series on some of my takeaways from my trip to Blackberry Farm, we're at lunch on the second day, and sitting next to Jeff Walker, and he's describing his live launch to everyone else at the table. And I've seen him do a breakdown of his live launch when he does it to 1,000 people, and I've seen him do it to I'm in his mastermind launch club, and I've seen him do it to that, which is like 100, 200 people. But to be able to sit there one-on-one with him, basically, or 1-on-4, and have him describe this live launch was a pretty cool experience, because we got to dig deep into it. Stuff that you don't get to do when you're in a large group like that. And he was talking about one of the things that he mentioned was how he did this live launch. And so instead of a produced PLC, pre-launch content video, and then another one, and then another one, all of his lessons were done live. And he would do these like 3-hour, extravaganza lessons. And they were just amazing. Now there was some produced content in there, like the case studies weren't, he didn't do the case studies live. They were recorded videos so they could be succinct. But I mean, most of what he did in this 3 hours was live, and he did live Q&A and all that. So it was just a really cool way to do a launch. But then when the cart opened and he was selling, he wasn't live. And one of the things that reminded me of was, one way or another, you're conditioning your audience. And he had conditioned his audience with 12 hours, 13 hours of live content to expect live and to like him live. And he kind of weeded the people out. Like, if you didn't like Jeff live, because Jeff, like me and like a lot of people, when they're live, they'll go off on a rabbit trail. They'll go off on a tangent. They're not polished live like we would be if we were editing the video. And if you have one of those things where you think about something and you go, it's a great question. Let me think. So if you, I'm not sure. Like, okay, here's an example. Okay, so you see what I did there? Like, that was just me. I wasn't even thinking of a specific thing, but I've spent like 12, 15 seconds just, trying to think of the answer, right? It's not very compelling TV, as they might say. You would edit that out if you were doing a produced video. In fact, if you were doing a produced video, you would think through it beforehand. You would have some bullet points up on the screen. You might even use a teleprompter. I personally don't use teleprompters. I use bullet points. I might use phrases that I want to say and have those on screen, but a one page up on my screen, I could talk off that for a half hour, because it's, concepts to make sure I don't forget the point. Well, when you attract an audience that doesn't mind those things, and then suddenly you go to produced sales video and produced content, and you're not doing any lives, there's a disconnect, and it hurts sales. So the idea here, because it fits right in, is, we just finished up our ultimate guide to monetizing a small email list. And you can check that out, mattmcwilliams.com/small. We've got, 5 Facebook Lives that we did on the topic, 4 or 5 videos, 3 or 4 or 5 written posts, and a bunch of other stuff and some additional resources on there. And one of the things that we talked about, I believe it was the 4th week, was we talked about conditioning your audience. And I led off with this quote from Mark Sieverkrop where he says, one way or another, you're conditioning your audience. And we were really talking about specifically conditioning your audience to click, conditioning your audience to expect to be sold to expect offers, not to just give away free content, not to put the post in your email. You can go, again, you can check that out, mattmcwilliams.com/small, and you can go watch the whole replay about how to condition your audience to click. These things have completely transformed our business over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's great. You want to condition your audience to click, but how are you conditioning them otherwise? What expectations are you setting? Are they expecting a produced video? And then you come out with this like selfie video. And there's a disconnect there. And it's like, wait, that's not what I signed up for. And it doesn't do very well. Are you conditioning them to expect the selfie videos and then you come out with a really polished video with B-roll and background music and they're like, I don't really like that. What is it? And that led me to the question in the discovery, a reminder of the discovery I shared with the group. I'm better live than I am produced. It's one of the reasons why, as I mentioned, 5 or 6 episodes ago, I've gotten to the point where what I do now, rather than whip out my fancy microphone that does great and sounds a little bit better than what I'm doing now, but it requires me to stand perfectly still and talk into a microphone, I'm walking right now with my phone. I'm talking into an iPhone. And I'm pacing back and forth in my office, only because right now it's way too cold for me to go outside and walk. Otherwise, I'd be doing this as I'm walking. Now, I put a windscreen on the phone to block, the background noise as much as possible. But a few episodes, I did an episode entirely from a gas station in East Tennessee. And so you can hear, if you listen close enough, you'll hear the cars going by in the background. You'll hear a car door slam and, you'll hear some, I don't know, maybe some birds. I don't remember if there were birds or not. But you'll hear some background noise, even though I had the windscreen on. So what? I'm better live than I am produced. I've gotten really good over the years. I ran for office a few times and I learned how to read off of a teleprompter and not sound like I'm reading off of a teleprompter. It's actually a certain skill that you just have to develop over time. You can do it. But even then, I'm not as good as I am live. I'm not as good as I am just on my feet live. And you have to decide that. You have to determine that. Are you better live or are you better produced? From a practical standpoint, if you look at something like Facebook, our Facebook videos get an average engagement of, say, 1,000 views and 50 comments, 20 likes, something like that, right? Our Facebook Lives, they hit that within an hour or two of finishing. Like within 2 hours of finishing it, they've already hit 1,000 views. They'll have 200 to 500 comments and 30 to 40 likes and a dozen or 2 dozen shares, as opposed to our other videos, which may have like 8 to 10 shares, right? It's a drastic difference. And then that stays there. And then, you look at the thing 3 days later and 3,200, views, a few more comments and a lot more shares and stuff like that. And it's like, live, my audience likes lives. And it makes sense from just an algorithm standpoint as well, that Facebook would reward those lives. You get the comments and things that you don't get on a produced video that's just uploaded because you're engaging with your audience. So just from a practical standpoint, lives do better on Facebook, for example. Lives do better on Instagram. Lives do better on pretty much any platform. Lives do better on Google, on YouTube, I should say. You take the same content, present it live, it gets a bunch of comments, it gets a bunch of live shares, and live, people are more likely to tweet about attending a live presentation than just sharing the video later. So you're talking about some of the biggest platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Live does better. But if you aren't any good live, then don't do live. You have to determine that. But then you have to be consistent. You've conditioned your audience to expect live, so give them live. You've conditioned your audience to expect a certain format, so give them that format. It doesn't mean you can't have innovation or creativity or go off the rails every now and again. The last episode, I went off format, so to speak. But you condition your audience, so you need to fulfill those expectations. So again, from a practical standpoint, that means if you're doing a live launch, stay live. Keep going live when the card is open. I've made that mistake too. If you're conditioning your audience to expect a podcast every Tuesday, then deliver that podcast every Tuesday, unless you're going to change completely. Don't fall short. You're running a business, so you've got to meet those expectations. And then just from a practical standpoint, you should probably be doing more lives. They have better reach. That's a big reason. They're a lot more fun. They're a great way to connect with your audience. And they're a heck of a lot easier than produced videos. I will tell you, it takes me and my team, and I used to do all this myself, it takes 10 to 12 times longer to produce a 10-minute video than it does to do an hour-long live. The hour-long live takes us about an hour and a half. It takes about 30 minutes to kind of put the bullet points in a doc, remind us, make sure we have the right URLs, set up the live, get the lights turned on and the equipment turned on. It takes just that long, maybe not quite as long. You still got to make the notes for your produced video. So that's an equal thing there. And it takes usually, and you got to turn the lights on and all that and set up the recording equipment. And then it usually takes, a half hour to record. And then you got to render it, and then you got to export, and then you got to put the graphics on the screen, and just all those things that you have to do in a produced video that on the lives, you put the graphics on the screen in an easy way. We use BeLive to go live. So there's just some practical reasons why you should do lives, and then you get to use those as produced later. So anyway, my point there was, when you condition your audience, make sure you meet their expectations. Make sure you're taking this into consideration regularly. What am I conditioning my audience to do, and am I delivering on that? So go check out that ultimate guide to monetizing a small email list. It'll help you regardless of what size your list is. And you can watch that Facebook Live that we did about conditioning your audience to click and buy. Again, mattmcwilliams.com/small. Go check that out, and I'll see you in the next episode.